they let all those people in? Why'd the cops just kind of open the doors, lift up the ropes? Have those cops been charged? What was that anyway? That's on tape. It happened.
He could stop this. He could stop it.
At least one person over here is being injured and taken away.
Capitol Hill.
The decision was made at the highest levels of government to hunt down anyone who was at the Capitol on January 6th.
If you see what Tucker Carlson is doing right now on Fox News, the documentary I did basically comes to the same conclusions. And we show you a lot more, in fact.
January 6th demands a full and impartial investigation.
Side. This is not an easy job. It's one that we should celebrate, we should honor, and we should recognize. So please join me in welcoming to the stage our next speaker, Senator Rick Scott, our hero.
Jessica, thanks for the introduction. Thanks you for what you do. If you don't remember anything else I said today, the most important thing is I want to thank you. I've been in Washington for a little over 4 years, and the one group that cares about two things is heritage. They actually really care about good policy, and they really push good policy. They bring up good policy. They promote good policy. They help you move good policy along. They work with your office. They do an unbelievable job with policy. And that's great, and that's helpful. But if you look at it, there's only one group up here that is really active both on the policy side and on the action side. And that's Heritage Foundation and Heritage Action. So if you want to be involved in somebody that wants to get to the result, because you can have a great policy, but if the wrong people get elected, if the people up here don't have any support, you're not going to get the result. So my background, I'm a business guy, and all I've ever thought about is how do I get over here? You always think about you're here, and I got to get over here. Well, you got to do all of it. You can't just do part of it. And so thank you for supporting the Heritage Foundation. Thank you for supporting Heritage Action, because you are the key if we're going to turn the country around. Now, I'm going to tell you how bad it is up here, but I'm actually very optimistic about where we can go. I don't believe there's any limit of what we can accomplish. The only limit is us. The only limit is our ability to dream and make things happen. Now, my background is I'm one of the most blessed people in this country. I was born to a single mom. We lived in public housing, and I thought my mom was ridiculous when I was a kid. She said, "You're going to make straight A's. You're going to go to church all the time. You're going to be an Eagle Scout, and get out of the house and start making some money." So when I was 7 years old, I was selling TV guides door to door after school every day until I sold the 50 copies I got each week. I told Ann and I are blessed. Today's our anniversary. We have 2 daughters, 6 grandsons, and 1 granddaughter. And I told my 7-year-old granddaughter, 7-year-old grandson the other day, I said, when I was 7, I was working every day selling something. And I actually never stopped. I had to sell potato chips to go to Boy Scout camp because my parents didn't have the money to pay for it. I had to sell enough stuff to get there. And so I've been selling stuff door to door like that all my life. And so I asked my grandson, when is he going to start selling things? What was he going to do? So all the books I send to my grandkids, it's all about how are you going to build a business? And how are you going to make sure you're a productive citizen? So I was born to a single mom. She told me, thank God you live in America because there's no limitation. You can be anything you want to be. So when I was governor, I used to go to schools a lot, and I tell these kids, I said, look, I don't know if you know your dad. I never met my dad. never met in my whole life. I had a tough as nails mom. We lived in public housing. I said, how many of you want to be the governor? And by the end, I said, well, you could live in the governor's mansion, you have Secret Service, you get to meet the president, you have dinner at the White House, you meet kings and queens, you get to eat whatever you want to eat. By the end, they're all going to be the governor. And then when I told them, because here's what happens, the problem we have is there's so many kids today that have no hope. And there's maybe adults that don't believe there's no hope. And so what I wanted to make sure these kids knew is if I could do it, they could do it. So I ran for governor. I'd been in business all my life. I built companies. When I was 40, I had 285,000 employees. I built the largest hospital company. I built a bunch of manufacturing companies. I ran for governor in 2010 because what people forget about is Florida was in the tank. We had lost 832,000 jobs in 4 years. More people left the state of Florida than moved in 2010. We had 1.1 million homes in foreclosure. Home prices had dropped in half. It doesn't sound like Florida, does it? Our sunshine didn't change, right? The people didn't change. We have great people in our state. We changed how government worked. I ran in a Republican primary against a guy that had been in Congress for 22 years and sitting attorney general. And I ran on one issue. I'm going to get people back to work. My slogan was, let's get to work. I promised 700,000 jobs. Every economist said it couldn't happen. We actually got 1.7 million jobs. And guess how many jobs government created? 0. We actually took the number of state workers from 128,000 to 112,000. We stopped all the tuition increases. We became #1 in higher education, top 5 K-12 education, 47-year low in our crime rate. I went through every line of the budget every year, 4,000 lines, written purpose. If you didn't make the purpose, I vetoed your money. Now, I've been up here for 4 years. I ran to do the exact same thing up here. DC is completely dysfunctional. What you see on TV is actually how it works. There is no accountability up here yet. There's not an accountability in any bill we pass. Nothing. None. We don't pass budgets. We don't review budgets. You can't even get a copy of the budget. You can get a copy of a spending bill. We don't do budgets. I'm on the budget committee. So I mean, just let's think of what's happened just in the last 2 years. It takes 60 votes in the Senate to pass anything, right? We could have fought, we're having a great fight right now, and I'm optimistic on the debt ceiling. We could have done that in 2021. 10 Republicans helped the Democrats pass the debt ceiling with no structural change, no cuts to anything. Then we passed an infrastructure bill with more than 10 Republicans. It took at least 10 Republicans to pass. We passed that, and it spent incrementally for roads, bridges, airports, and seaports. This is infrastructure. What I spent per year in Florida for those 4 things, that's what incrementally we're going to spend over the next 10 years for the country. It was all Green New Deal. We passed a CHIPS bill with Republican support. Here's how it's going to work. If anybody here works for Intel Corporation, here's how your company's going to get money. Company made $20 billion last year, CEO $180 million. I'm happy that people make money. I'm a business guy. We're going to give them $4 billion to build a plant they committed to build, $1 billion tax credit, $4 billion tax write-off. Their CEO came and testified. Now, this is a bill that Republicans helped them pass. Their CEO came and testified, said, this is an anti-China bill. Oh, absolutely. I said, right now, about 40% of your revenues come out of China. You're going to change anything you do when you get all that money? No. I said, when China invades Taiwan, will you change what you do? Absolutely not. Horrible bill. Omnibus, in other words, omnibus bill. We could have waited 2 weeks and Kevin McCarthy would have written that bill, right? We could have waited. They gave us at 1:30 in the morning, the Tuesday before Christmas, because everybody wants to go home for Christmas. We could have waited. We could have done another continuing resolution, which we've been doing since October. $1.7 trillion, 3 times the size of the Bible. We voted on it within 48 hours, 7,500 earmarks, and it took Republican votes to pass, and it did. Yeah. So I decided to run against Mitch McConnell. This has to change. We actually have a Republican Party. We have conservatives all over the country. We just don't have enough of them in D.C. People go and campaign for stuff. They're hell-bent on balance that darn budget, cutting taxes and fees and doing all this stuff to reduce the regulation. What happens when they get here? Is it the water? So I didn't win. All right? The vote was supposed to be in January, got rushed in November, so we didn't win. But guess what? It's the start of a new dawn. We're going to start having accountability up here. And we're doing more of it right now. We're actually having in our lunches, we actually talk about policy. So I believe that if we continue to fight for what we believe in, I believe that because look, the country's in deep trouble. But I believe if we fight and get the right people elected and help those people when they get elected with policy ideas and how to help them sell those ideas through the action side, that we'll change the direction of the country. I put out a plan, and within 24 hours, Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, and Mitch McConnell attacked me with the same talking point, a complete lie. Because guess what? Up here, no one wants a plan. Like when I was 40 years old, I owed $10 billion. Do you think I could have gone to any bank and said, I don't know what I'm going to do with the money. I don't know if I'll get a return, but will you give me some money? No. But up here, they believe they can run for re-election just saying, that guy's bad. So if I went to the bank and said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but the people in this industry that I want to be in are really not doing a very good job, so give me a bunch of money. They would have laughed at me. But that's what we're doing. So we have got to have a plan. I put out mine. You can go to rescueamerica.com. And what I tell people, you don't have to agree with my plan. Put out your own. Let's fight about it. That's what we're supposed to do up here. If you follow the Senate right now, we generally don't have many amendment votes. We don't even go through committees. The bills come to the floor, generally with no amendment votes, and then we just have to do up or down. It shouldn't work this way. So when I ran, I said, we're going to run this place, like you should run it. We all represent our states. We should be willing to fight over what we believe in. If I can't sell it, that's my fault. If it's different, if you should be doing something different for your state, vote that way. Because if we all did what the Constitution said and represented our states, then we wouldn't have $31.5 trillion worth of debt. If you look at the CBO score, we're gonna get to mid-50s in debt within 10 years. And by the way, we don't have any conversations about that. So let me just talk about the debt ceiling conversation we're having right now. So 6 of us have been working together in the Senate since the run against McConnell. Mike Lee, Ron Johnson, Mike Braun, or Rand Paul, and Ted Cruz and I. And we've been every week talking about how are we going to change the conversation about the fiscal responsibility of Congress. And once a week we've been meeting with House members. And so the Freedom Caucus actually put out something that was logical that they can sell. The bites at the apple to fix this fiscally is, one, get everything we can to get structural change and cut everything we can with this debt ceiling fight. Then pass real budgets. Go through, have votes on the budget. Let's fight over it. And then everything we do, we're every day. How do we get to live within our means? And by the way, people say you can't do that. We all do it. We all do it. I walked in with a $4 billion budget deficit, and I remember I went through all 4,000 lines right after I got elected. I put out a budget, and they said, well, we do this. I said, well, my family had that problem, and we didn't get any money. I said, what? I said, why do we have to do that? And people were shocked that somebody would actually go through the budget. And I said, by the way, this is what our projected revenues are. We will not spend more money than this. So we will allocate the dollars, looks like every family does. That's what that's what we have to do up here. It can't be up here, everybody gets everything they want. That way we make everybody happy. And that's why we have $31.5 trillion worth of debt. So I'm optimistic. I don't know where the House is going to end up, but I'm going to do everything I can to work with Kevin McCarthy and the House to have a responsible debt ceiling fight where we have structural change, where we stop this reckless spending and we claw back every dime we can. We get people back to work. I had a I responded to a Wall Street Journal piece, and I was in there yesterday. I started working when I was a kid. Why don't our kids work? We ought to work. So I've had a bill since I've been up here. It's called Let's Get to Work, as you'd expect. If you're able-bodied, why are you on government programs if you don't want to work? Why? I mean, think about it. Would you tell your kids to do that? No, I'm not gonna. I don't want you to work. No, I don't think it's good. I'll just support you the rest of your life. And by the way, that'd be one thing if you actually had money. What if you know that you don't have the ability to do it, which our federal government doesn't? So thank you for all your support. I want to thank everybody at Heritage for what they're doing. I want to thank you, each of you, for supporting Heritage because they have a big impact. So I think now I'm doing questions. Oh, yep. I've answered most things, so I'll try again. Okay. Yeah, I can repeat your question. I can hear it and I'll repeat it.
Yeah, so when each state is charging, let's say, roughly 5% tax, maybe not Florida, each state charges like roughly 5% tax, but the federal government is taking like 40-something% of an average person's money. I don't think that's the way the founders intended it. You're on the budget committee. I'll just let you take it from there.
So our government should be way smaller. So when I build companies, I'd started companies from scratch, and so what you got to do is you got to figure out how to reduce your overhead all the time. So, and then when I was in manufacturing, the expectation was I had to cut my cost every year to keep my clients. I mean, by contract I did. It's totally different. It's totally different in government. As soon as I went to the governor's office, the expectation, here's the attitude. If you don't spend more money, then you must not care about that issue. It's not to solve problems. I'll give you a story. My whole campaign in 2010 was about getting people back to work. So all I've done with my life is I bought screwed up businesses and I fixed them up and I sold them. That's how I made money. So I started going agency by agency. I'll just give you one story. I go to the agency that does unemployment. Okay, it's right after I got elected. I said, how's it work? They said, Governor, we're open 6 days a week because unemployed Floridians don't have enough time to apply for unemployment during the week. It gets better. They're dead serious, by the way. I said, I read this article that you could be in prison and continue to get your unemployment benefits until they run out. Well, yeah. I said, you realize we run the prison system. We know who's in prison. I said, if you found somebody that got a job and kept their benefits, would you ask for the money back? No, we wouldn't do that. I said, if you go on unemployment, do you have to do anything? They said, yeah, we have to apply for 5 jobs a week. I said, how's that going? We don't enforce it. I said, let me ask you a question. What is your purpose? Most of these problems, it's not the people that work in government, it's the leadership in government. I said, what is your purpose? They said, our purpose is to get everybody we can in Florida on unemployment because the state only pays 26 weeks. Thank God for Barack Obama. He gave us another 73 weeks for free because we don't have to pay for that, right? And that's 99 weeks. Eventually, our economy will turn around if we can get everybody we can on unemployment. That was the attitude. So I said, okay, so we're going to enforce the law, and we're not going to allow people to commit fraud. So when I left, there were 22 million people in Florida. There was about less than 100 million people on 1 million people on unemployment when I got started, and when I left, there were 61,000. All we did All we did was we went to everybody on unemployment and say, why are you on unemployment? And we worked to find everybody a job. So government the way we should think about government, we should make government smaller every year, as your taxes should go down every year. So just, as an example, even since 2019, through this pandemic, our population grew by 1.8%. Well, shouldn't your taxes go down by 1.8% then? We should share the same, unless it's some massive problem, we've solved most problems. And by the way, here's how bad the numbers are. Population since 2019, pre-COVID, is up 1.8%. How much is Biden's budget up? 55%. So I think what we should expect is every tax and every fee we could cut or get rid of, we should do it every year. But I can tell you what, the most important thing we can do, the taxes are important, it's the regulatory environment and the permitting. So of all the things I did as governor of Florida to get more jobs, it was one, I asked for them. Number two is I cut 20% of regulations. Right? We didn't need them. And I streamlined the permitting. So when I became governor of Florida, you were going to get, we have 5 water management districts. You were entitled to a permit, but we made sure you hired a lobbyist and a lawyer before you could get it. And the average time to get a permit you were entitled to get was 2 years. By the time I left, it was under 5 days. Because you were entitled to it. But no, it shouldn't be 5% or 40%. It should be, we should cut it every year. What else? So I'm supposed to do the mic. I follow the rules, whatever the rules are.
Hello. Can I hold it? Oh. So we know when people run for Congress, which is not easy, these people are filled with integrity and real commitment and real intention to do good. And then what happens in Washington? They get compromised somehow. Is it the lobbyists? Is it the Chinese? Is everybody in Washington being paid off by somebody to keep things exactly the way they are? Because that's what it seems like. You don't call me out, I won't call you out, and nothing changes. What can be done about that? And we know Biden is one example, but beyond that, what else is going on there?
So here's the way I think about it. First off, people come to you guys for money, right? All these politicians come to you for money. How many of them would you hire? So whose fault is it? Theirs or yours? What are your standards? And then if you help somebody, think about it like a job interview. When I ran, I gave people a plan. I had a 7-step plan. And then I told people constantly if I did it. Right? And so I told people, here's what I'm going to do if you hire me, and here's how I'm doing. Why don't we do that as donors? Say, okay, what are you going to do? Write it down and say, okay, so this is exactly what you're going to do, and I want a report card on how you did. Because they're going to come back to you for money. Are you going to give money if they don't do it? If they don't do other stuff in your life? If they say they're going to cut your grass and they don't cut it, you give them money? It's us. We've got to have higher standards. Now look, there's unbelievable pressure to go along. Let me tell you how the money follows in the Senate. So in a Senate race, there's 3 pockets of money. There's what you can raise for a campaign. You can raise $6,600, thanks to Biden, inflation went up, $6,600 per person per cycle. Then the Democrats have a Senate committee, Republicans have a Senate committee, and if you look at them, what they raise, they can be involved in about 6 races, and they can spend about $15 million a race. If you're good, right, you can raise $10 to $25 million for your campaign account. Schumer and McConnell each have super PACs. These super PACs will have $500 million in them. Now, the negative, and people can give whatever they want to those. No caps. There's caps on the Senate committee. Now, they have to pay more for the ads and stuff like that. But let me give you a race. My race in 10, Schumer's PAC spent $65 million against me. There's no way in God's green earth I could raise $65 million. So now, if the money flows that way, where do you think your allegiance is? Right? You're going to vote against the person that gives you the money to win your race? It's pretty hard to do when they might spend 30 or 40 or $50 million in your race. So there's a lot of pressure that way, and then there's a lot of pressure, like the first thing to tell you is, get along. You ought to, don't rock the boat. I remember I got my first job in a grocery store, and it was unionized. I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, and the first thing they told me is, don't work that hard. We all need to make sure we all have a job here. So, there's lots of pressure to go along. But the way I look at it is, I didn't get helped by McConnell's PAC in 18. My job is if I don't raise my own money, it's my fault. So, and that's why I'm not worried about. I can vote in the best interest of my state. I don't have to worry about what somebody else is doing. Yep. What else? I think I'm supposed to do based on the mic. Are we done? Okay. All right. Okay, let me just finish with the last thing. Thank you. Thank you for support of Heritage Foundation. Thank you to all the employees at Heritage Foundation. Thanks to everybody, for Jessica, everybody at Heritage Action, because you are making a difference. And this is our opportunity. Peter Drucker said, if you remember what Peter Drucker said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. We have the opportunity to create the country we want if we put enough effort into it. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Big thank you. He's wonky, but he's the exact type of senator I want up here fighting to control our spending and make the Senate work for the American people. It's my pleasure to introduce a great friend of Heritage's, Bridge Colby, who is the author of The Strategy of Denial, which is a cover-to-cover walkthrough of our great power competition with China. Please welcome Bridge Colby.
How you doing? Good to see you. How are you doing? Good to see you.
Introduction there. My name is Bridge Colby, and it's really a great pleasure to be here as part of the Heritage Foundation's flagship 50th anniversary conference. If I may say, Heritage is where the best and most creative thinking on the future of the Republican Party and the new right is happening. I'd just like to congratulate Heritage on its leadership, courage, and vision, and I'm really looking forward to what it produces in the coming years. Now, speaking of leadership, courage, and vision, these are the qualities that define the person I have the great honor to introduce today, Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri. Senator Hawley's distinguished record is, I'm sure, known to all of us here. Senator from and former Attorney General of Missouri, author of 2 incisive and penetrating books, and, if you will, a super lawyer. Senator Hawley is here to speak about China, the challenge it poses, how we got to this perilous impasse, and how we can get our country through it. No one deserves to be heard more on this topic than he, and not simply by reason of his position. There are a lot of people around Washington talking a lot and in high dudgeon about China, but almost no one has sought to lay out a vision, a plan, and a rationale for how our country can deal with this threat that's as real as the massive challenge that China poses. Most of what passes for China hawkery is more like peacockery, in my view. A lot of strutting and flapping of wings, but not backed up by real substance and seriousness. It's usually a recipe for doing the same things that led us to this impasse, not a real and credible agenda for change. Josh Hawley is the opposite of that. He is truly grappling with the scale of the China challenge, with the seriousness it deserves, with the courage to follow through on meeting what it entails. For that reason, I hope you all join me in giving him the close hearing his message deserves. Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Josh Hawley.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Bridge. Thank you to Kevin for having me here. Thanks to the Heritage Foundation. You know, I have to say, it was the Heritage Foundation that 23 summers ago helped spark my interest in conservative policy. I was an intern at the Heritage Foundation in the summer of 2000. How about that? What a time to be alive that was, the summer of 2000. Doesn't seem like that long ago, but I tell you what, I remember telling my parents, this was one of the first summers that I had worked away from home. I was a college sophomore at the time. And so I was away for the summer here, and I remember they'd ask me about my experience, what was it like, and who did you meet? And I told them, I said, it was just like being with family. If your family are made up of policy nerds who have Newt Gingrich over for breakfast on a regular basis. But it was great. It was great, and it's great to be here now. I'll try to be on my best behavior at this family gathering, so to speak. I can be controversial. The last time I was at Heritage, just a few weeks ago, a protester stormed the stage. Who knows what might happen today? I guess every family has its crazy aunt or uncle, right? And these days, that might be the same person. So, who knows? It's Joe Biden's America. I mean, you know, what might happen? Yeah, some of you are just getting that. It'll come to you later. The truth is that in all seriousness, nobody has done more for 50 years now than the Heritage Foundation in setting the agenda of the conservative movement, in pushing forward the ideas of the conservative movement, and standing in the gap when we needed people to stand. And at this time of challenge, and at this time for choosing, it is again the Heritage Foundation that is at this forefront of the fight. It has never been more important. And I say choosing deliberately, because that's where we are. It is a time for us as conservatives to choose what it is that we're going to be about. It is my conviction that we stand at one of the great crossroads in American history. The decisions that we make in the next 5 to 10 years will determine the trajectory of this country for the next 50 to 100. That is the burden of our moment in history. It is also the opportunity of our moment in history. And the question is, what will conservatives do? What will we do in this hour? Will we have what it takes? Will we take the stand that we must in order to save this nation? Because that's what's on the line. It's the character of the nation. It's the soul of the nation. It's the future of our nation that we are fighting for. We face a rising adversary in China. Bridge Colby mentioned it just a moment ago. We face the loss of industry here at home, the unraveling of our social fabric all around us. Pick any measure you want. Birth rates, marriage rates, family formation, all falling. But above all of the challenges that we face, I think the one that may be the most pressing, the most dangerous, is the challenge of the new radical left and the new brand of Marxism that they have embraced. This is a left that now seeks to fundamentally transform American life, that seeks to change and overthrow practically every institution that we value. Marriage, the family, the very idea of gender. They want to purge Christianity and any kind of Bible influence from our culture. This is the great awakening that the left has gone through, the great awakening that they want to force on this nation. And my contention to you today is that the Republican Party, as we have known it for the last 30 years, is not prepared to face this challenge. The Republican Party, as we know it, must be reformed. And the question is, will we as conservatives do what we must to see the party reformed, to see it stand up to meet the challenges of this hour? You know, this was what President Reagan faced. He had to transform the Republican Party in order to meet the challenges of that day. This is the challenge that is before us now. Now, you might ask, well, what needs to be changed? Well, how long do you have? No, I'm just kidding. Let me, in a slightly more serious vein, let me tell you a story that I think will get at that question. The story has two parts. Here's part one. In the 1990s, when I was still a teenager, the world changed decisively, and so did the Republican Party. Republican leaders in those years embraced what you might call a politics of New World Order, and this change was not for the better. The 1990s, Soviet Union collapsed. You remember, the United States prevailed in our long Cold War. Everywhere, freedom appeared to be on the march and authoritarianism in retreat. And a good part of the American intelligentsia in this period decided that that was the natural order of things, that this was nature taking its course, that this was history with a capital H on the move, that this was the end of history. Our victory in the Cold War wasn't so much a product of careful strategy and a perseverance or the courage of people like President Reagan. No, it was actually it was the natural order, right? This was just history evolving, progressing towards its natural conclusion. And that natural conclusion, according to many of these people, the so-called end of history, was not the victory of the United States per se. It wasn't the victory of the nation state. No, it was the victory of something different. It was the victory of a global market, the victory of the unifying forces of globalism. If you read the end of history theorists, what you will find is the conviction that a globalized world, and above all, a globalized economy, was the wave of the future. That the world was destined to become one great unified economic empire. Now, this had some appeal on the right, because after all, conservatives had for years rightly defended the free market over against Soviet-style central planning. So if you want to talk about the free market, well, that's something that we were for, absolutely, but the kind of unified, globalized economy that the end of history people foresaw was very different than the free market economies of nation states that conservatives have championed for decades. No, the end of history types, they wanted to break down the borders between nations. They wanted to capitalize on the free flow of goods. They wanted a new world order. That's what George Bush Sr. called it. You might remember. It was 1991, I think. He gave a speech in which he talked about open borders, open trade, and open minds. That was his troika. Open borders, open trade, open minds. And that New World Order required a revolution in American policy. It meant major changes to our trade policy. It meant major changes to our monetary policy. And that's exactly what we got over the next 25, 30 years. It started with NAFTA, and then GATT, and then the WTO, and then most favored nation status for China. What did it mean? It meant no more protection for American manufacturing. It meant no more fostering of American industry. No, the priority now would be the free movement of capital. It would be globalism. The New World Order also meant major changes to our foreign policy. An economic empire required a military force to defend it. And these proponents of New World Order wanted America to furnish that military force. The New World Order Republicans wanted America to be a global hegemon. They wanted us to be the global hegemon. And so they gave us a massive and permanent presence in the Middle East, later 2 20-year-long Mideast wars. They committed America to a forever presence in Europe, not just a presence, but a forever giant footprint on the European continent that couldn't be questioned, couldn't be changed, couldn't be adjusted in any way. And they gave us decades of constant conflict. Constant conflict. Look at the last 30-some years. Constant conflict on almost every continent on the globe, where America was constantly called in to use forces, to expend our capital, to spend our lives. I just suggest to you this: 30 years into this experiment of New World Order politics, the verdict is in. The politics of New World Order have failed. They have failed our people. They have failed our party. The pursuit of economic globalism has failed. The pursuit of liberal empire has failed. It has cost us shocking sums of money. I think Senator Scott was maybe just talking about some of that. It has fueled the rise of our most serious adversary, China. We will surely look back at the decision to create the World Trade Organization in its current structure and to admit China to the WTO, and then to give China permanent most favored nation status as one of the most colossal errors any global power has made in its history, and certainly it's one of the biggest errors the United States has ever made. What did that do? Well, it fueled the rise of China. China has built its military on the backs of our middle class. China has systematically cheated on trade, systematically cheated and manipulated its own monetary policy, and the policies that our governing class adopted in the 1990s and early 2000s helped them do it. But worse than all of that, the New World Order politics has cost us a way of life, and that's the working class way of life. The economic policies of the last 30 years have sent millions of jobs overseas, and they tend to come from one part of the country. They come from the blue-collar worker part of our country. It is the working class, the middle class of this nation that have paid in jobs lost, in wages lost, in families lost, because of the politics of the last 30 years. What has that meant practically? Well, it's meant that whole towns and communities have disappeared. Listen, I know, I came from one of them. I'm from a small town in West Central Missouri. I watched, as I grew up, local industry leave. I watched jobs be lost. I lost folks who work nearby at a manufacturing plant, who work nearby on the assembly line, lose their jobs, lose their livelihoods, lose the ability to support their families. That's happened all across our country, not just in Missouri, not just in Michigan, not just in places that begin with M, but all across the United States of America. And that brings me to the second part of my story, the growing threat from within, the Great Awakening. The Soviet Union lost the Cold War. Thank the Lord. But Karl Marx lived on. He lived on in the English departments in American universities. He lived on in the law schools of American faculty rooms. And in places like that, a new Marxist ideology took root that trashed American society as fundamentally oppressive, systemically racist. You've heard this. It's all over the news now. It is the fashion of the Democrat Party. This new ideology began in American academia, but soon, over the course of years, spread everywhere. And I do mean everywhere, like a disease. First, the student radicals in the late 1960s, then faculty members, governance organizations. Now it's infected our businesses, our self-proclaimed elite class, our media, certainly. Now, this virus found a welcome audience in those places because they revised Marx to suit their own ends. You don't hear a lot about fighting economic oppression from these people. No. This is about a cultural revolution. That's what the new Marxists are interested in, fundamentally transforming American culture. They decided that Marx was, only half right. Economics isn't destiny, they decided. No, actually, culture is destiny. That's what the new Marxists say. And they don't like American culture. They don't like our history, which they say is systemically racist. They don't like our institutions, which they say are too tethered to Christianity. They don't like the family. They don't like gender. They want to fundamentally transform this nation. The cultural Marxists are now in power. I don't have to tell you that. All you have to do is turn on your TV. All you have to do is cross the bridge into Washington, D.C. You'll see it everywhere. They run the Democrat Party. They run the Biden administration. Have you been watching who Joe Biden is nominating to be judges in this country? I mean, I sit on the Judiciary Committee. I have to tell you, judge after judge after judge. These are people nominated for lifetime appointments. Ask them what they think about this country. Look at what they have said about who we are, that our criminal justice system is corrupt to its foundations, that we are riddled through with racism as a nation, that we should apologize for our past and our character. It is the reigning ideology. This is the new Marxism. It is the reigning ideology of this administration. And it is the greatest threat, I believe, to this country in any of our lifetimes. It is the greatest threat in any of our lifetimes. And here is my central contention to you today. The Republican Party is not well prepared at this moment to meet it. We are not in position to meet it. And I just contend to you, in some ways, the Republican Party of the last 30 years has been part of the problem. The Republican Party, for decades now, has, in its policies, has helped to undermine the very people who I contend to you are the most important bulwark against cultural Marxism today. And I'm talking about working Americans, working class Americans, middle class Americans. Ours has been, in this nation, a working class nation, a working class culture. What do I mean by that? It has been the working people of this country who have formed our country's character from day one. Historians have marveled at this for literally centuries. Tocqueville wrote about it. This is a nation that has never been driven by the people at the very top. Never. The left says that now. That's part of their propaganda campaign. That's not true. It has always been driven. Our most fundamental convictions have been shaped. The life of our nation has been pushed forward by who? By the working people, middle-class people of this country. By farmers, by pioneers, by builders, small business owners. That is who has shaped the American character. That is who has shaped the United States as we know it. And working class, middle class institutions have defined American life. The family, neighborhood, church, country. These have been the bedrock institutions that unite us as a country because they've been at the center of our culture, and they are now exactly the institutions that the radical left has under full assault. They are exactly the institutions preserving exactly the values that today's Marxists want to sweep away as obstacles to progress. And the problem is, Republicans have not been defending them. The Republican Party's embrace 30 years ago of this New World Order politics, this globalism, decimated working class jobs and families. It helped undermine working class culture. After we let China into the WTO, our trade deficit exploded. Over 3 million jobs vanished. Not jobs from Wall Street, jobs from Main Street, working class, blue-collar jobs. Listen, you know this. A job means independence. A job means being able to speak your mind. A job means being able to support your family. Republicans help take that from working people. This is the Republican policies anyway. This is the difference. For years now, the HR managers at our biggest firms have forced those who want to work in the multinational corporations to toe the party line, to go to the DEI trainings. Working people, so long as they were essential, so long as we needed them on the farm, needed them on the factory line, needed them performing essential tasks, they had some independence. They had a bulwark of strength. But when they're no longer needed, when the corporations can outsource those jobs to China, when they can replace American workers with slave labor elsewhere in the world, guess what? That working class bulwark disappears. That working class culture begins to fade. And now, without the fear of economic disruption they once had, today's new Marxists are bullying, or trying to, blue-collar workers and blue-collar communities into submission. The only way to turn back the left's culture war, the only way, is to strengthen working people and the middle-class consensus, the middle-class culture of this nation. That is my only contention to you today. We as a party, those of us who care about the future of the Republican Party, must move it immediately to higher ground. It will not be enough to decry the woke corporations. It won't be enough. It will not be enough to complain about DEI training. We should do that, but that will not suffice. If we are going to resist and turn back the left's culture war, we have to create a bulwark against the left's radicalism, and that will come in the center of our country in the great American middle class. If we are going to be the party that saves this nation from the new Marxism, we must fight for the working class in this country. That is my contention to you. If we lose them, we will lose this country. If we lose the middle class, if that culture is destroyed finally, we will lose American culture and American society as we know it. So what are we going to do? The whole of our policy, the whole of it, ought to be oriented right now at home and abroad toward protecting the family, protecting our neighborhoods, protecting our churches, strengthening our country. This has to be our overriding singular focus and priority. What does that mean abroad? Well, it means an end to liberal imperialism abroad. Listen, we face in China an adversary the likes of which we have not seen in any of our lifetimes. The Soviet Union was a powerful, determined, rapacious adversary. But China has more economic capability than the Soviet Union could ever hope for. China has the ability to be a truly peer competitor to the United States in a way we simply haven't seen for over a century now. That means that when it comes to our interests abroad, we have got to rigorously focus on countering China, our biggest threat, and do less elsewhere around the globe. We cannot be the world's policeman. We should not try to be. We do not have to be a global hegemon, but we do have to defend American interests and American security. And right now, China is the #1 threat. At home, it means a rigorous focus on bringing back industry, bringing back blue-collar jobs, jobs that can support a family, curbing the power of the big multinational corporations that want to squelch competition, that want to dominate our markets. Let's strip China of normal trade relations. Why not? They shouldn't have it. Let's take it from them. Let's require our most critical goods be produced in this country. Let's balance our trade. There's the trade deficit nobody wants to talk about in Washington, I can tell you. Actually, they don't want to talk about any trade deficits or any deficits at all. It's spin to oblivion. But I tell you what, the trade deficit is a critical one because it represents not only the overdraw in our accounts, it represents all of the money we are giving away to other countries, in this case, China above all. Let's balance it. Let's balance our trade. Let's strengthen Buy America. Let's break the backs of the big monopolies in this country that want to play by a different set of rules, that want to crush the little guy, that want to have no competition, yet want to get all of these government handouts. Let's put an end to that. Let's restore the economic and cultural power of the working people of this nation. That's how we're going to save our culture, if we will do it. That is the path. I just say this, today we sit here and we may feel outnumbered, maybe outmaneuvered, but the heroes are still out there. In the heartland, in our factories, in our churches, keeping America alive. The good people of this nation are ready to fight for this nation. They are ready to rise up and defend this nation. They need help from conservatives in order to do so. This is the great challenge of our hour. I believe that we can do it, and I believe that the Heritage Foundation will, as you have for the last 50 years, lead the way to the next 50, and we'll look back, I hope, decades from now and say, in that critical time, at that critical hour, we rose up, we stood firm, we saved our country. God bless you. Thank you so much for having me.
Please direct your attention to the screens.
Here's 7 things you can do today to help counter the threat of Communist China. Delete TikTok. Every day TikTok stays online, Americans continue to be exposed to Chinese Communist Party surveillance and propaganda due to TikTok's parent company, ByteDance. Vote with your wallet. Don't support the companies, like those in Hollywood and sports leagues, that whitewash China's human rights abuses like their Uyghur genocide. Be conscious of where your goods come from. When there are alternatives, buy products made in America or in allied countries, and ask your representatives what they're doing to reshore the industries that we lost to China. Ask your school or alma mater if they're protecting students from CCP repression or influence. Have they divested their endowment from China, reported funding from China, and cut off cooperation with Chinese government-linked entities like Confucius Institutes? Make sure your savings aren't funding our adversary. Don't let the big banks, pension funds, and VCs that have invested over $1 trillion into China use your money to undermine our country. Read up on why Taiwan matters for national security and how we can prioritize our military strength in the Indo-Pacific. China wants us weak, complacent, and distracted. Hold your representatives accountable, ask your friends and family to do the same, and subscribe to Heritage to learn more.
Ladies and gentlemen,